Yo, 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 yo. What up? Welcome to another episode of How Billy Sees It. Today is May 29th, 2023. Another episode. I wish I had started keeping count when I first started. I didn't do that. So we've been keeping a good count with Sheba, and like her shows are now in like episode 20, and it's really exciting. And I think I'm up to, I'd have to be at least episode 40. I've been doing this for a bit now. It's really crazy how time has flown and how this thing has started and how it's evolved and where it's going, and so much stuff. I'm excited. But thank you for being here. I don't know if you saw earlier today, my wife did an episode of Sheba Sunday, even though it's a Monday. And she tackled the issue of men she loves. My wife got challenged by her mom to be a bit more open and loving and softer to men in her critique, in her social critique. And so she was like, you know what, I'm gonna do a Sheba Sunday. And what she did in the Sheba Sunday was very unique, and it was very her. And she picked men that she loved, and she also used it as an opportunity to talk about the problems that she sees with our gendered world and the way that, you know, she sees men operating. And so it was a really interesting episode, just more insight into my baby and how she thinks and how she sees things, and we unpacked it afterwards. We unpacked some of it before. It's pretty cool. That's one of the coolest things about doing these shows myself alone and with her, is the opportunity to think about the shows before the hand, and then to watch them and to talk about what came out afterwards. Because thankfully we both kind of do a very loose outline model, and then we just kind of let ourselves go and see what happens. And it's been working well for us, y'all. I really appreciate it. So that's what we up to, man. Let's see. Today I wanted to talk about intersectionality. And I wanted to talk about intersectionality for a number of reasons, because I think it's an important thing. It's an important concept, and it's something we should kind of better understand. I think it'll be a jumping board for understanding lots of other stuff. And so to talk about intersectionality well, I think I need to... Uh-oh, is something playing? Hold on. Oh, we got some music playing. But that is from... Okay, great. That's from the app. Yeah. Great. All right. I want to make sure that music doesn't like overextend me, but I want to add some little music to the backdrop here you might hear, okay? Okay, so intersectionality. Look, intersectionality was created by, or it's a concept, a word that was made famous by a scholar, a woman by the name of Kimberle Crenshaw. So let me actually go to this other one here. Sheba, tell me if the music is drowning me, or if one of us needs to be louder or something like that. Help me out. But here we're on Time Magazine, Time website, and they're talking about intersectionality. Intersectionality, again, as a term, seems to have been coined by Kimberle Crenshaw, and the point was, it was an effort to think about the intersecting and overlapping nature of struggles in our world. And so it's a powerful concept that really helps us point closer to the way things are. See, the whole point of these concepts is to see if we can create a map of reality that, obviously, there is no such thing as an accurate map. The only thing that reality is only as accurate as itself. But the maps we create, the ways we talk about reality, give us a sense of what's going on, you know? And so intersectionality is powerful that way. I actually went to, y'all ever mess with Google Bard before, yo? Google Bard is Google's AI version of ChatGPT. And I signed up on it, and right before the show I went on and I said, Google, please summarize Kimberle Crenshaw's ideas on intersectionality in 3 paragraphs or less. And this is what I got. And I think it's pretty interesting. They came up with this in a couple of seconds, and I think it's pretty good. And I think it's worth reading. So I'm just going to read it. And I might just shrink me down down a bit. Okay. So it says, sure, here is a summary of Kimberle Crenshaw's idea on intersectionality in 3 paragraphs or less. Intersectionality is a term coined by Kimberle Crenshaw in 1989 to describe the ways in which different forms of oppression, such as racism, sexism, and classism, intersect to overlap to create unique experiences of discrimination. Crenshaw argued that traditional approaches to understanding oppression, which focus on one form of oppression at a time, are inadequate because they fail to account for the ways in which different forms of oppression can compound each other. I think that's powerful, and I think that that's true. I think that's accurate. I think that I was raised, and I still hear discourse like this often. An event happens in the world, and just to continue this refrain of journalism and being able to map and articulate reality well, you have an event occur, and then we try to categorize it, and we try to say, oh, this is a racist event, or this is a sexist event, or this is a classist event. We have certain frameworks for understanding something, when Kimberle's pointing to something that the reality is much more complex than that. So for instance, as it says here, for example, a black woman may experience discrimination in the workplace because of her race, but she may also experience discrimination because of her gender. And so this is a double discrimination that can make it more difficult for her to find a job, get promoted, or earn a fair wage. I think that's right. I think that's accurate. And of course, the same is true with other categories and social categories that we have. And so the same black woman might also be a gay black woman. And so they're going to receive another, I don't want to call it a layer. There's some of this stuff is language, you know. As we go through this video, I actually have an interesting thing I want to do. I'm going to take out Blender and take out the 3D program and try to construct a different way of thinking about intersectionality, actually, and help illustrate that through this 3D program. So stick around for that. But you know, this framework is huge and very important because it steps us way up from thinking that someone's experience is entirely tied to one particular category that they might be a member of, that one identity category that sums up the experience. And so any you know, experience that we might have, in order to simplify it, we might simplify it down to one thing. But as it says here, this woman, you know, her experience will be entirely unique because of those 3 categories that we've identified for her, and the ways that those 3 categories show up in our social systems and our political discourse, and the way that we perceive her as a member of those categories. She will have to contend with those things. Not just her status as a black human, not just her status as a female person or a woman in our social arrangement, not just her status potentially as a member of the LGBTQ community, but all of those things are true. And if we take it counter, no, I'm not even gonna go there yet. I don't want to go there. Okay, let's go back to the definition. Intersectionality can be used to understand a wide range of social issues, including violence against women, access to healthcare, and educational attainment. It can also be used to develop more effective strategies for addressing these issues. Okay, so I think that that's right too. Obviously, if you come at things thinking that things are entirely a construct of one simplified, you know, angle of analysis approach, then you will come up with a simplified solution. You will try to address that one solution, and you might be missing all of the other interlocking, interweaving, intersected truths at play at that moment. So let's continue. Crenshaw's work on intersectionality has been influential in a number of fields, including law, social work, and education. It has also been used to inform public policy debates on a range of issues. Good. But I also see it sometimes being challenged, and I want to consider those challenges, and I'll do that in a minute. Here are some of the key points of Crenshaw's work on intersectionality. Intersectionality is a way of understanding how different forms of oppression, such as racism, sexism, and classism, intersect and overlap to create unique experiences of discrimination. Correct. Traditional approaches to understanding oppression, which focus on one form of oppression at a time, are inadequate because they fail to account for the ways in which different forms of oppression can compound each other. Intersectionality can be used to understand a wide range of social issues, including violence against women, access to healthcare, and educational training. Did I read this? Okay, that's up here. All right, so this is just the bullet point summary. Got it. Intersectionality can also be used to develop more effective strategies for addressing these issues. Okay, great. Interesting. So they gave it to me in like paragraph form and then again in more of a bullet form. Thank you, Google Bard. I think it's pretty good. I think Kimberle Crenshaw would probably thumbs up on this, so I'm gonna do that. So again, very interesting, very critical way to think about things. I think it's oftentimes, I grew up in Brooklyn, and you're black and you're a boy. I tell a story in one of my videos where I got arrested, detained twice, 2 times in 1 year. Both very scary ordeals for me. And it depends on how I'm framing it. How I'm thinking of myself will determine how I frame that experience. And I could, as some people do, directly, immediately, they say that it is because I am black. I'm black. But obviously, it's also true that part of what caused this confusion, first off, both times I was detained, it was mistaken identity, whole kind of messy ordeal for a couple of hours being handcuffed and sat embarrassingly on the sidewalk in Brooklyn as people walk around. And another time I was in a police van and had to just sit there for several hours, or almost an hour or so. It's also true that what was at play has a gender component. I think it's more likely that, and I know it's more likely that the police round up and arrest and detain and rough up boys than women. And it's just true. And you might say that there's reasons for that, right? A lot of the violent crime and the interactions that police have to do, they deal mostly with violent, aggressive men. And so there's some logic at play there, and that's fine. But the point is to say that the interaction has a racial component, the interaction has a gender component, and both are true. And in fact, as I see it, the way I see the world and the way I see things, it's even more complex than that. In both cases, I was in Brooklyn, Canarsie, kind of a rougher neighborhood. The other one was around Brooklyn Tech. There's so much going on. There's class at play. There's a broader, it's 2000, the year 2000 or 1999. There's broader economic truths and social clashes at play that are not part of my equation as I sit and think about what happened then. But with enough time and distance and a real effort to look at it, if I really wanted to make a full and complex story, I would have to include something much more than simply being black as the culprit here, and something much more than simply being a black male as the culprit. It's a whole bunch of stuff. There's a culture of policing there, so there's those things are at play, and all of these things were at play on that moment, and we each walk around carrying the assumptions and the expectations as a burden on us in a way. These expectations related to absurd things that aren't really meaningful, right? That aren't core to who we are, but yet they're readily available for other people as they look at you and as they assess you and as they try to approach you with a shorthand. They don't know you, so our minds construct a shorthand, and we fall back on our biases and assumptions, and those are powerfully prevalent in things like race and in gender. Why? Because we have a historical truth at play that those groups, those certain racial groups, certain gender groups, have been in the United States expressly denied, the full rights and privileges of citizenship in the United States, expressly, consciously, actively, and so. All of that is at play. Okay, so that's the definition, and that's what Google Bard summarizes for intersectionality. Now I want to get to something that I saw a friend of mine on Facebook, a Facebook friend. I don't really know dude, but I do see his stuff and I respect the stuff he posts. Let me turn my lights on. Actually, it's getting dark out here. Oh, hold on one second. Give me a second, folks. Matter of fact, yeah. Okay, here we are. Let me put this light on. Boom. Oh my gosh, really bright. Okay, we back. Okay, there's a dude on Facebook who I think is a really interesting dude. He's an artist and he posts his ideas pretty frequently. He's also engaged with beekeeping and bee life and land questions. He's grappling with questions about land and ownership and race. And I find his discourse and the stuff he posts to be pretty interesting. All right, so here's the dude. Let's go to this right here. His name is Christoph Carr. And this is just a post he had. So I just want to check this post real quick. This is like his bee stuff. But he says, I'm noticing a lot of people say, when I talk about diversity, I don't just mean race. I mean gender, sexual orientation, neurodivergence, and etc. Which means we have to make sure all the different types of white folks are good before we worry about black folks. And we don't even have the mental space to consider that there are black trans women. And the last thing we want to deal with is a confident, intelligent, straight, seemingly black man. Carry on, liberals. I have B boxes to finish building. Okay, so I think this is pretty interesting and powerful what he's pointing to. Okay, let me see if I switch it this way. Okay, I think that the dude here is pointing to something related to what we're talking about with intersectionality. Today, even as we have expanded language, so obviously we've gone through a phase where people were using race to justify grotesque, inhumanity and violence, right? And then I've lived through a phase where people tried to say, oh, well, I don't see race, that this was the appropriate approach to the question of race in our social spaces, right? White people in particular, I don't see race, and we've had a social struggle back and forth to say, no, race, that is the wrong answer, actually, that it's more complex than that. And to say you do see race and to be honest about how you see it, and to engage in that. But I think what's been tough too is to sometimes in that conversation, there are these penalties for being clear and honest about the biases that we all hold. And so, the difficult work is in, I think, trying to traverse that. That's like we got to encourage, I talk about honesty and empathy a lot. We have to encourage the most honest interpretation of what's going on. So that is to acknowledge these social categories and how they play out in our minds, and the biases that we hold, and then to work through them. It is not to, certainly it isn't to harm people over silly things like skin color, but it also isn't to ignore that skin color exists. That's not true. That's not how this works. It's actually acknowledgement, acceptance, and working through these truths together. All right. So when he says that, so it gets, I don't just mean race. I mean gender, sexual orientation, neurodivergence, etc. The discourse on intersectionality is like, it's grown more complex. The more we understand about the human condition, the more we understand about our social arrangements and the ways that we categorize and see each other, the more complex the conversation is. It isn't so simply as I was raised a lot to believe that the primary, line of bifurcation between humans was black and white, that people are black or they're white. And that is the primary ways that we should think about each other. differently, and that the social struggles are entirely in that space, and then the political struggles are entirely in that space. They're related to black people versus white people, and of course, there's a historical truth around that. There's a historical reality that has occurred that we cannot change. That suffering, that oppression, and the cultural norms and the response to that, everything that has evolved from that in the United States sits on that foundation. So race is powerful. Race can't be ignored. Race is something that's true and prevalent, but so is gender. And we know that women were denied access to the franchise, and were denied, access to banks and financial freedom. That the entire society was built in such a way that women had to become wives. They had to be married off in order to secure their independence of any kind from their families, or to prosper on this grand American capitalist project that everyone's so excited about, that it wasn't available to certain groups of people, entirely. It was cut completely off for generations and generations. What he's saying here, sexual orientation, neurodivergence, etc. I see people, so there's this, now when we talk about intersectionality and diversity, we recognize that race was prevalent because this was the framework constructed and overlaid on the experience of reality by colonizing enslavers and their cohorts, the people who profited from the chattel slavery system. Race is a construct. Whiteness versus blackness was an easy construct upon which they could justify intense horrors and manipulation, generations of family separation and torture and ownership of humans. And so race has this powerful thing to it. And now we realize that there also is gender discrimination. There is also sexual orientation discrimination. We have a new discourse that is, it's not that it's new. It's not that it's new. It's not, this always existed. It's that language, awareness around it is new. Awareness that there's such a thing called neurodivergence, and that people, their internal composition, their internal workings, they're on a neurological level, people are experiencing the world differently, and that they have that right. And that we're each different so deeply, on such a deep level, that the skin color difference was such a weak, dumb, it's the purview of the stupid person to be overly concerned with that. It's the purview of the racist person, obviously. Racist meaning simply a bias, in to assert that this distinction, the fact that one person's skin color might be darker, skin pigmentation is darker than another, that this is either a negative or a positive, that this is an over focus and over attention to something. But then it becomes real, right? Because the historical truths around it, the exclusion, the intentional exclusion, the intentional abuse. All right. Even this word neurodivergence, right? Neurodivergence still speaks to, it implies that there's some central thing, that there's some core natural state that is normal, let's say, and that some group of people divert from that. I think the further you go into the question of neurodivergence, the more complex it is. You realize you're talking about all kinds of stuff, and these are just words, So what struck me with this, though, was I think he's pointing to something where now we have all this complexity, and in order to talk about this complexity, and we should talk about it with as much clarity as honesty as we can. What happens is, it seems, at least it does for Christoph, and I see this, I know what he's talking about, that black becomes constricted, the people are going to be interested in talking about gender, particularly for white people. People are interested in talking about sexual orientation, particularly and especially for white people. Neurodivergence, studies will come out, and it will have a paucity of effort to understand how neurodivergence shows up in the black community and the depth of why it shows up differently and what it looks like. And as he said, we don't have the mental space to consider black trans people, women, and confident, intelligent, straight. See, and so, as I read this, I go, these are words, these are words that we attach to people as we attempt to understand the complexity of the human condition. And we say, this is bah. But we have to remember, I think, I'm a black man. I identify as a black man. I accept those words, and yet I'm not that. Something much more than that. And so are you, whatever you are. And the cool thing about it is, as he talks about this, so the fact that we can even talk on this level has a lot. We owe a debt of gratitude to Kimberle Crenshaw and the work that has been done by her and other womanists like her, who have, from their vantage point, they have an access to understanding the interlocking ways that oppression shows up. This is what some white people don't understand. It takes some care to be able to notice these things. And so it's easy for a lot of, for instance, white men to simply walk around completely unaware that there's such a thing as male privilege, completely unaware of racial privilege. They'll try to deny it. We see this framing, and quite often it's disingenuous stuff. We see this framing of down to sexuality, it's evolved. It used to be the case that gay people were considered mentally ill, and they would try to propagate that, but that's no longer the case. Now they've moved that to trans people. But these are expressions. These are human expressions. And then we have words that we use to try to state that something is X, Y, and Z. Right? So I'm black. I'm a male is my sex, by the way. Male is my sex. My gender might be man. I use pronouns he and she. My sexuality, straight. My nationality, I'm an American citizen. I have dual citizenship, actually. I was born in Guadeloupe, which is a French province. My ethnicity is French West Indies, Caribbean, immigrant to New York. So I got a New York ethnicity as well, Black New York. My religion has changed. I have a kind of loose spirituality that doesn't have a label. I avoid labels, frankly, for some of the reasons that I'm talking about here. That it's something more unique than that, something more unique than some of these other things. But I just want to go and again, those categories are important, not because those are the things that define me in particular, that those are the best ways to talk about me. Those are the categories that have been used in history to create separations and to oppress and to set up benefits and privileges throughout society. Those are the categories that have congealed into something like a truth when they were originally just concepts, particularly concepts utilized by powerful people to separate themselves or separate different groups for political advantage and things like this. It's important to talk about these things with that kind of clarity and that kind of depth, or else you can end up in a weird place. By that I mean you can end up believing deeply in these categories as being fundamentally, as the fundamental battlegrounds of social, conflict. And historically they may have been that, but there's always this truth that it rests on an untruth, And I think that that's super important to say. It's so obvious that it rests on an untruth because, as I mentioned before, I'm someone who I've just recently started to get allergies. I'm having some tough allergies, man, and I'm like sneezing, but I never had this. And as a kid, I played football. Obviously, you're outdoors in the grass, and so I played with some guys who had some tough allergies. I'd be 17 years old walking from school, from Brooklyn Tech down to the field, and I'd walk with my boy Alan, and Alan would his face would be melting. He's just crying and sneezing, and he's got an inhaler, and and he just was suffering. And I'm walking through I'm frolicking. I have no similar concern or experience. I remember watching him with some confusion, like, what's going on there? Now, if we're honest, like, in terms of an experiential truth, in terms of our experience on this planet, we're having very different experiences, right? But if you're lazy, we were both black boys. That's it. They're black. And you could talk about our experience through the lens of our blackness and try to think that you're told an adequate story, and you haven't. You've told an insufficient, incomplete story. The truth of Alan's experience is so deep and different and so unique from mine. It has to do with his race, his gender, sexuality, nationality, ethnicity, religion. It has to do with his allergies. It has to do with his bone density, his testosterone or estrogen levels, his lung capacity. It has to do with his nearsightedness, his left-handedness versus right-handedness. Some people are sweaty. Some people are just sweaty. Some people are not sweaty. Some people have earlobes that kind of dangle, and other people have earlobes that attach right to the jawline. Some people have full lips. Some people have thin lips. Some people have eyes that are kind of inset on their face, deep set, I believe is the word. Some people have eyes that are more prevalent on their face, and that's sort of eye positioning versus even another thing for like eyelids and such. Some people grow hair. Some people don't. Shiva doesn't grow hair, which is, awesome for me. She grows hair only on the pom-pom and like a little bit in the armpit. And the rest, her legs, absolutely smooth, doesn't grow. That's just her condition. Other women have a very different condition. But you might say, if you're lazy, you might say that women do X or women have X. And you'd be wrong. So words continue to be insufficient. I just want to hammer that home because that's so important to understand. And I want to go back to my boy Christoph's thing here, and I want to point to the comment that I left. So I left a comment here, and from this comment, I'm going to go into sort of the 3D concept that I have, okay? So I say, Christoph, I see your frustration, bro. I think you're pointing to something powerful that I find connected to a fundamental challenge of language, of attempting to describe what is. Even some of the best discourse on intersectionality seems to invoke the image of separate threads, which occasionally crisscross and intersect. The truth is something more like we're all this gelatinous thing, and we experience ourselves through these distinctions. Why? I've already explained why we experience ourselves through these distinctions as they've been codified and congealed in our norms and in our laws and in the ways we talk about ourselves. Distinctions which have been highlighted and solidified through historical oppression and cultures which have built from that. I find it a linguistic challenge to describe ourselves, all of us, with truly unifying language. Our baseline understandings and mythologies are rooted in a false sense that we are separate fundamentally. Okay, so we're getting to it here. Fundamentally, and I think it's a challenge in language for someone even as brilliant as Kimberle Crenshaw, a womanist scholar, to describe the condition that she's pointing to. She has to use words which are necessarily a challenge. She has to point to all of these different distinctions of ours and point to the ways that they work, and it kind of boxes us in as we talk about it to miss what I think is a deep truth, which is at the end of the day, we're all one thing, and that these distinctions are distinctions, and they arise not because they're true as meaningful, deep distinctions, but because of the historical truth, as I described a second ago. All right, so here's what I'm gonna do, y'all. I'm gonna open my favorite program in the world called Blender. I just got a new computer, by the way, and it's singing. It works like a charm. I'm loving it. I'm gonna try to get some Overwatch on here. I want to start like streaming some game stuff too. So, but anyway, I'm on here because today this just popped up, and I said, you know what? Let me tackle this. Let me see if I can talk about this in a good way. All right. So what I'm gonna do is I want to talk about what I said in that comment. I was saying that the language around intersectionality can sometimes give the sense that everything is a separate thing. I don't think this is a fault of the model. It's just a quirk of language. But there may be some like lessons we can learn and some ways to improve our understanding of it. So I'm a very visual person, and so that's what I'm going to try to demonstrate here. All right, so let's say that this is the imagery that conjures up for me when I think about intersectionality in its traditional, like when I first heard about it. My sense of intersectionality, even today, tells me that there are these kind of crisscrossing things that each of this. Let's give this a color. This is being black, so let's call it black. All right, so that is black, and that's there. And so then you have this other thing. So let's say you're a black woman. Let's duplicate that and bring this here. And so being woman, let's go real typical here, and let's make this pink. It's easy to remember. Okay. So the idea of intersectionality seems to suggest, in my mind, typically, and I think this is what Christoph is pointing to, it seems to conjure the image that there is a strand, there's a thing called being black. There's this category, there's this social category called blackness that exists here. And you might be, if you're black, then you are relevant in this strand, you know? This is about you, this strand here. And then there's a thing called being woman, and that being woman is separate. And it's this other thing here. And in the past, while, other people might try to talk about these things as entirely separate, Kimberle Crenshaw very brilliantly tells us that no, they're not entirely separate. These things crisscross, and they crisscross right at this juncture right here. So I hit that. Let me add a little bit of I want to add a little icosphere. There we go. Okay, so that's the intersection of race and gender in as it relates to black woman. Okay, so I'm swooping around just so you can see. Okay, so what else though, right? Let me pull out. Clip end. Okay, so what else? Let's say she's a Christian. Let's pull this out. Being a Christian is its own color, and that gets yellow. I don't know. I'm just going with that. Let's see. Let me give it. Yeah. Let's fuck it. Orange. And so here's the intersection for Black Christians. And here's the intersection for, what is it, women who are Christians. Do you see how this is panning out? And tell me, I know Sheeb, you might be the only one on the joint later right now, but for people who are watching this at any time, I'd like to see if you agree with me on what I'm arriving at here. That this is, does traditional conversation on intersectionality give you the same kind of approach, same kind of thinking? What I'm gonna do with this is I'm going to give it another material. I'm gonna make this like a cool glowy joint here. Oh yeah. Let's see. All right. So for this is a glowy. That's a glowy. All right. So what about class and poverty? Let's say there are a poor person. That this is also a separate. Let's give that poor person. Let's give it a green. Okay. So what do we have here? We have another intersection, and another intersection, and another intersection. And so what's cool about the theory and true and accurate about the theory is that you have this opportunity. You see that, where are we here? Women, they suffer at the point of being Black, or they deal with the world. The world constructs norms and expectations around them, not just as a Black person, but also as a Black woman. Not just as a woman, but also as a poor Black woman. This poor Black woman has a unique experience right here at this location, at this juncture. This is a woman who is a Christian. She has a unique thing, and we can keep going. We can keep going. We can keep constructing more and more stuff. Let's do, what do we got? Sexuality. So let's go with, let's make it like a purple, and let's make that distinct from the other joint. That's tough. Let's do it there. There we go. And boom. Again, another set of intersections arises. And what's interesting, obviously, so here we have an issue with so here we go. So a gay person can be gay and poor. This is a unique experience. The woman can be poor and a woman. This is unique. Christian and a woman. Now, one of the things I've done here, and this is sort of visually and structurally in my thinking as a visual person, one of the challenges is that now I've constructed something where it seems being gay and Black doesn't interlink, which is wrong. At some point, we would have to extend this far enough, and we can do that. In fact, you see, you'd have to this is the funny thing, so, oh gosh, this is coming out together pretty nicely, actually. Let me keep going here. What happens a lot when let me talk about the news real quick. When it happens a lot when the news comes, the news wants to zero in on a particular event, and boom. So this is what, Black women. So they might do, in the past, they would just go, in the past, it would be Black, Here's an event. Black people went through this, blah, 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 blah. And what Kimberle Crenshaw did was she introduces a framework for understanding our situation, such that we can have some complexity and realize that the condition, the experience, is sometimes something more than just being Black. It is also Black and poor, which is right here. What do you want to look at? Where do you want to shine your camera? Black and poor. Here's what the Black feminist situation is. Here's what the Black Christian situation is, And what I was saying earlier is I had a condition where, because of this framework, because of the visual framework that I'm creating, this line, which represents the LGBTQ community, which again is, each of those is just words, that it's not intersecting with Black, but I can address that by simply pulling out further. Check how interesting that is. The further I pull out, boom, they're gonna eventually intersect. And so here is that intersection over here. And so it's important to sometimes, when relevant, get right to understand that this is a part of the human condition as well, and to talk about it with that complexity. So this is sort of this is the visual framework that is conjured up for me when I typically read or hear about whatever. Oh, cisgender. My baby says cisgender. Yeah, like let's take exactly. So let's take the picture, the one that represents being gay. Let's switch it to another color. This is red, and we might say that so gay and cisgender are kind of opposites in a way, or at least the challenge in terms of thinking about how they intersect. So this is another challenge with this framework that isn't, by the way, this isn't Kimberle Crenshaw's visual framework. This is my own. But I think that the visual framework is more powerful for me. That's kind of how I think. So there are these challenges that come up for me where, certain things, it can conceptually feel like they don't intersect, and that it's that, so man versus woman, and that that these things don't intersect in the same way because they're opposites. They are mutually exclusive. And so here's where I think here's what I want to update, right, with some use of some 3D stuff here. And I think I have a different way of thinking about this situation. So here we go. What I'm going to do is I am going to set a marker to bind that camera there. I'm going to duplicate this camera. I'm going to push it over. And I'm going to set a marker to bind to that camera. Okay, so we're on camera 01. Camera 01 is going to slide over. Camera 01 is going to slide over. So let me see what my baby's saying. She says other intersections include disabled, citizenship status, English speakers, cis or trans. Exactly. Cis or trans is what you were thinking. So you're exactly right, Sheaves. When we come back to this model, we can keep going. We can keep adding, again, English speaker, as you said. At some point, it's just like I got to add new colors and sort of have a map to understand it. But that you then eventually you create this mosaic of the human condition and the ways we interact with each other, understanding that these inflection points are all key, unique, pivotal, experiential truths that are worthy of our consideration as we talk about like what is going on in any given moment. Okay. So I've talked about that. Now I want to talk about what I think like I said, one of the problems is this notion in my head. It seems that there are certain things that are opposite, and so they don't necessarily intersect. There might be things that are parallel. There's that. There's also, I think that this visual framework, which is my own, it underscores the connectedness. No, it doesn't underscore it. It oversimplifies such. It doesn't do a good enough job to help me understand how deeply connected things are. So for instance, if my issue is being black and poor right here, that of this massive map, right? Again, if we keep pulling out further and further and further away, I have to extend the thing. Uno momento. If we keep pulling further away, you can get the sense that you have this whole big weaving, and you might say, all right, well, that's cool, but the intersection I'm interested in is right here. It is this thing, or it is this thing. What is this? Gay. This is gay woman, I believe. I want to suggest that I want to update my visual framework to better understand what I think is actually happening. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to go to the center of this joint, and I'm going to add this object called an icosphere. An icosphere is just a big ball, but it's a 3D ball. And I'm going to show you a bit about how it works in 3D. Any object, no momento. All right, we back. Let's see if this thing will work for me. Come on. So I'm trying to get I have a tablet, guys, and I'm trying to get the tablet to work. The tablet is not working currently, which is gonna make this a little bit more annoying, but we can still get it done. No sweat. Let me see if I plug it back. Oh, no, nothing. All right, great. No worries. All right, so every 3D object, let me go back to this, is really a bunch of other stuff. Okay? Check this 3D object. In order to make it, it's really a bunch of dots. These are individual points here. Okay? Not too dissimilar from the points we saw in our old joint here. Okay? But let's come back to this guy. We have this thing. The first powerful part of this thing that I want to highlight is that it's all one thing. You see, when I come to a certain understanding, when I look at it, it is all one thing, right? Undeniable. Now, when I go in here, each of these is a thing. Each of these is one of those points that we saw in the previous thing. It's one of those inflection points, a category, a way of describing ourselves, a way of thinking about ourselves. And they're all connected because this is one person, let's say, but it's also one world. It's one universe. It's one it's one item. And the truth of the matter is that we are so deeply complex that there are, let's see, how many vertices are there on this? I could find out how many vertices on this. I think, is it 43? Yeah, I think there are 43 vertices on this icosphere right now, right? So, oh no, that's the frame I'm on. Nope. So I don't know how many vertices this is, but I just want to demonstrate something real quick. I can do something that will make them many more vertices. So I'm going to do this thing called subdivision surface, where it subdivides every face on this thing, and I'm going to do it twice, and then I'm going to apply that subdivision. Apply, and now look at it. So as you can see, now there are many more of these vertices available on this one thing. Okay, so ding ding. Okay, so what I want to suggest is, and let me give this its own material. Let's give it a nice blue, and let's make it really shiny. I want to smooth that out. Got some nice stuff going on here. Let me add a light real quick. Light, point light, okay. And I'm going to make that light big, and I'm going to make it bright. So 3000, and voila. Okay. So it's all one thing, all right? And as I said in the little conversation in that comment, I said it's like we're like a gelatinous thing that has all of these. How did I frame it, yo? Let's get back to that real quick. How did I frame it in that conversation? I said the truth is something more like we're all this gelatinous thing, and we experience ourselves through these distinctions which have been highlighted and solidified through historical oppression and cultures which build from that. All right, what did I mean there? Look, we're all this one thing, and but how do we think about ourselves? Well, we think about ourselves as black, and as a woman, and as a straight or gay person, as an American. Okay? So I pull those out, but I want to do something actually even cooler than that. There's this other thing I can do here that creates a wireframe. Check this out. So we go wireframe. I want to keep the original, and I'm going to go here. I want the wireframe to be a white. I want it to be very shiny. All right, and I'm going to go back to wireframe, and let's change the thickness to 0.005. All right, so there we go. Material offset. All right, so 0.01. All right, so the difference in this thinking, I know, let's see where we at on time. We at 9. All right, we're rocking though. The difference in this thinking here is huge. In the first instance, to understand that everything is actually part of the same thing. It isn't a matter of separate strands that occasionally overlap. That visual framework that I created, it's too tenuous and loose. That connection between being black and a woman and whatever, it's you think it's all at this one point. Well, then it still gets the sense that they're separate. They're deeply separate, and they just overlap for a moment, so visually it helps me to think, no, this is more something like this. Let me add something else to this little thing just to make it a little fun. I can add a wave to it. Let's see, I'm going to take this, rotate it on the X 90 degrees, or nope, RX negative 90 degrees, and I'll shrink it down a bit, go up, go here. All right, so that's the wave. Let me see if I can have that chill a little bit, relax. Time, let's bring this down to 0.1, and let's see what happens. All right, so height, we'll bring that down even more. All right, so here we are, and we can see this thing that is the human experience. It is complex. What the hell is this, right? But let's go a little further. So now, it's complex because it is complex. It's complex because that's what the human experience is. It is not, these points here. I can only construct these things insofar as I've thought about this as a category, as a way of being. As I said earlier with the allergies, will I put allergies down here as a meaningful thing? I probably should, frankly. If I'm mapping something about how the experience works, there is a unique experience about allergies. There's a unique experience about hemoglobin, and about nearsightedness and left-handedness, and calf strength and glute things, and these are all separate things. And we might just because of our observational limitations, we might attach big butts, a certain kind of glute, we might attach that to blackness or black femininity, and we'd be wrong to do that. That there are men with a certain type of glute that we might lump that in with what we consider female. There are again, man, the allergies is just an interesting one for me. Testosterone and estrogen, lung capacity. There are people who can hold their breath underwater for longer times, and pain receptors. the depth of the uniqueness of whatever the hell is going on, like whatever this situation is, and how we talk about it is only a limitation. It is a framework for us understanding things. And I see this so prevalent as someone who spends time talking about the media. The media so easily will look at a situation and jump to attach themselves and tell a story based on these category things in order to cheapen and simplify and to quickly describe what is a deep and complex phenomena. And so here's your deep and complex phenomena, okay? What I want to suggest is, what's powerful about thinking about it this way, right, is that the truth is this. The truth is this bouncing little goop of all together thing. But at some point, this comes along, this wireframe. These are the lines that we've been trained to think about ourselves with. And so it might be the case that what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that up and down this thing are phenomena and perspective and words, descriptive words, and different ways of being, different truths about what this situation is. But this might become highlighted. This grouping right here might become highlighted. We might call that the racial grouping. And the reason it's highlighted is because of the historical truth. It is not as though there is something separate and unique in this space. This is just the residue of past issues and wrongs. And so this becomes, let's say, let's put that 3 up. This becomes really aware and prevalent, and so we talk about these pointers, race, for instance. We talk about this, but they're all connected. This is also connected to that. So race connected to class, connected to sexuality, and if we move it around over here, you might say, okay, and here's what I really like about it too, right? Let's say this is gender and this is women. Over here you also have the line for man, right? And you might think that they're separate entirely, but they're not. They're all part of the thing. And anytime you define stuff as woman and man, and you set these terms here, that they affect each other and that it's all connected that way. So again, let's put the wireframe back on. We might spend a lot of time talking about this dot or this circle, the race circle, a lot. Or we might spend a lot of time talking about the woman circle a lot. But that is a necessary requirement in terms of how to understand how oppressive systems have separated and oppressed these groups. And conversely, if this is the black circle here, the definitions around whiteness are also highlighted and prevalent and govern our understanding of these situations. And it might be useful to talk about it this way and to look straight at whiteness and talk about the problems and the challenges of what whiteness means. But if you do that, you can't, you better at least know that it's also attached to gender and sexuality and all the rest of it. So, that's my attempt to sort of see if I can contribute something to the conversation of intersectionality, which I think is hugely important. And I think certainly doesn't get a good and proper hearing in our public discourse because we are led by a lot of clowns and liars and actors and people who, aren't interested in these questions. They have fake models about how the world works, and they want to believe that each of us is entirely separate, and that things like, they just come up with mythical stuff like the United States is the best country in the world and there is no racism and blah, blah, we're past this and that. When of course that isn't true. So, I think that, let's see what happens with this, because the last time I did something with Blender was with the candlestick, as I was trying to explain sort of the different angles of perspective. I hope that I've kind of tackled this with some clarity, that it makes more sense. I find that it's a better way to talk about intersectionality. The strengths on talking about intersectionality this way reminds us that it's that we're all speaking about one thing rather than separate fibers which sort of incidentally or coincidentally intersect. It reminds us that everything is being affected by each other, and the ways we talk about each other, these lines reflect only the fact that we've had to use these inflection points for a discourse to talk about how history has played out. But in between these dots, there are several further other ways of talking about what is. What is even more complex than the 2 or 3 or 5 or even 7 overlapping categorical ways of talking about our condition. Okay? And I think that helps to clarify what my man is saying here. As Chris says, we start to talk about diversity, we start to diminish, the people who are leading these conversations might be happy to include, sexual orientation. Oh yeah, that makes sense. I start to get that. Yeah. Oh, I get neurodivergence, and you start to diminish what is still a very powerful and prevalent force at play, and a lens through which to look at the world, that it's all a part of it. And the best discourse, people who are talking about this most smartly and most accurately, will find a way to include all of this, and we can get better at that. You know what I mean? Woo! All right, listen, a couple of hours ago I said I wanted to do this. I had the idea for this, and we jumped on it. I think we got it popping, yo. This is, let me just make this a little cooler. Let me do some cool stuff with this. Here we go. A little glow. See if I make it a little see-through as well. So now it's like glass. You can see the other side. And that's life and experience and identity and social categorization and clash and collisions and sociology, intersectionality. Thanks very much for watching. This has been another episode of How Billy Sees It. Listen, next week is going to be great. I'm having a great conversation with my boy Kurt Hilton. Kurt Hilton is a friend and colleague from way back, from Stony Brook. He's Brooklyn Tech and Stony Brook alum and a good friend. I've talked about him. I've written about him. And he's continuing to find his voice on the internet and talk about and provide journalism about his experience on this world. And I appreciate what he's doing. We're going to talk about masculinity. We're going to talk about a couple things. We're just going to let it flow and see what happens, yo. And I hope you'll join me. That'll be a week from today at 8 p.m. On Friday, you will see Sheba. We'll be doing Black Bunny Hole. It will be Oprah Winfrey, episode 11 of that. And then she'll have Sheba Sunday. And by the way, we are bringing back Saturday morning cartoons, FYI. That's coming back, so get ready for that. Saturday morning cartoons is going to come back. It's going to be rebranded and looking good, and we're going to have a lot more fun. as we both feel a lot freer on this camera thing than we did when we first started. So it's gonna be dope. And finally, this week I'm gonna drop some new music, yo. So look out for that. It's a really, really dope song, yo. You guys are gonna. I'm proud of it. I think I keep getting better with the raps, and this one is definitely by far the one I feel is the dopest, and I'm just getting warmed up, yo. So watch out for that. All right, listen. It's about love. That's why we're on here. That's why we're here, and it's about communication because each of us are experiencing this thing differently, yo. And this is a wild, wild world. And I want you to take care of yourselves, all right? Take it easy. I'm going to leave you with this moment. Peace.